You see fear as the enemy of understanding, a disturbance that clouds the mind and blocks reason. You assume that clarity belongs to the fearless, to those untouched by doubt or hesitation. Yet Al-Ghazali questioned this assumption. He said that real clarity does not appear when fear disappears, but when fear is understood. Fear, he explained, is not the shadow of ignorance, but the trembling that exposes illusion. It does not conceal truth, it reveals where attachment hides. When you turn away from fear, you preserve confusion. When you face it, the false begins to dissolve. Perhaps fear is not confusion at all. Perhaps it is awareness awakening to its own limits. But if fear holds the key to truth, why do you rush to silence it before it speaks? In the 11th century, Al-Ghazali stood at the height of intellectual power. He was the authority scholars turned to, a man whose logic seemed unbreakable. Yet within that mastery, he began to sense an emptiness. His knowledge was vast, but his heart could not rest in it. Fear entered, not from outside, but from within his understanding. He feared that all he knew was borrowed, untested, imitated. That fear grew until the speech itself failed. He withdrew from teaching, not to escape terror, but to face it. What collapsed in him was not reason, but its false security. You think fear means failure, but fear, when examined, is simply the recognition that what you depend on may not hold. It is the moment when illusion begins to loosen its claim. Fear is not chaos. It is perception stripped of denial. It shows the mind where it has built on assumption instead of truth. Al-Ghazali saw this clearly. He said that to know fear is to know one's real position before what is greater than oneself. Fear does not confuse. It clarifies. It removes arrogance disguised as certainty. If fear reveals the edge of your understanding, why not step closer to see what lies beyond it? Al-Ghazali's crisis began not in ignorance, but in mastery. Every proof he constructed required another to support it. Logic rested on deeper assumptions that logic itself could not prove. He saw that certainty built by thought was still dependent on thought, and therefore fragile. The fear that followed was not madness, but honesty. It was the collapse of imitation. The intellect could describe truth, but not deliver it. When his reasoning reached its limit, his fear deepened into humility. He discovered that not all clarity is conceptual. Some understanding begins only when thought stops defending itself. When reason fails, what remains to trust? You fear not what is beyond you, but what it uncovers within you. Fear exposes the structure of your attachments, your dependence on ideas, status, or identity. It reveals what you have been protecting under the claim of understanding. Al-Ghazali called this mercy, not punishment. He said fear breaks self-deception. It shows the difference between what you believe and what you truly know. When fear removes illusion, it is not destroying you, it is refining you. You begin to sense that fear is not the loss of stability, but the return of sincerity. Yet when everything false is stripped away, who remains to claim certainty? For months, Al-Ghazali withdrew from public life. Speech left him, confidence vanished, and teaching became impossible. In that silence, fear transformed. It no longer demanded escape. It demanded understanding. He saw that fear was not his enemy, but his purification. It removed what was borrowed, so that what was genuine could appear. When he ceased to resist fear, it revealed what remained after pride dissolved. That remainder was humility, and from humility, clarity arose. He called this the beginning of sincerity, when knowledge serves truth, not ego. The mind that once defended itself became transparent to what it could never control. Al-Ghazali taught that fear purifies faith. Faith without fear becomes habit, belief without reflection, comfort mistaken for conviction. Fear renews faith by exposing the gap between what one says and what one truly sees. It awakens the heart to its dependence, not on certainty, but on trust. This fear is not despair. It is awareness of proportion. It reminds you that you do not sustain truth. Truth sustains you. To live without fear is to live without awareness of need. To live with it rightly is to stay awake to the vastness beyond control. Perhaps fear is not the opposite of faith, but its most honest expression. You seek to overcome fear through distraction, through reasoning, achievement, or control. You label it weakness, hoping to master it intellectually. Yet every escape confirms the illusion that truth must feel comfortable. Al-Ghazali warned that when fear vanishes too quickly, sincerity has not yet begun. Avoiding fear is not strength. It is postponement. What you refuse to face becomes the boundary of your freedom. You cannot transcend what you will not confront. The intellect seeks safety. The soul seeks reality. When fear arises, which do you serve? The comfort of understanding or the cost of awakening? Clarity is not what remains after fear ends. It is what emerges when fear is understood. Fear dissolves confusion by revealing dependence. It removes the illusion that certainty is self-made. When fear is faced without resistance, its turbulence becomes transparent. Al-Ghazali found clarity not in escaping fear, but in allowing it to complete its purpose. The same trembling that once blinded him became the movement through which he saw truth directly. Fear did not vanish. It transformed. It became comprehension itself, awareness without pretense. What is left to fear when fear has already revealed everything false? You begin to see that fear was never a mistake. It was the mind's awakening to its own limitation, the call to humility that makes true understanding possible. Every illusion collapses through it. Every pride is measured by it. To face fear is to return to sincerity, to stand before truth without armor. When resistance ends, clarity begins, not as possession, but as harmony with what is real. Al-Ghazali called this the purification of the soul, when knowledge becomes service and fear becomes reverence. The mind no longer asks to be certain. It allows itself to be shown. What remains then is not the end of fear, but the peace of knowing that fear has completed its task. The journey begins with the assumption that fear opposes clarity and ends with the realization that fear produces it. Through Al-Ghazali's life, the viewer witnesses the transformation of fear from disturbance to discipline, from paralysis to purification. Each reflection strips away another layer of false confidence, revealing that what we call fear is the soul's confrontation with its own illusion of control. By the end, fear is no longer an emotion but an understanding, the awareness that truth cannot be possessed, only received. Al-Ghazali's path reveals that clarity is not achieved by conquering fear, but by listening to what it teaches. When fear is understood, it dissolves, and what remains is not courage or triumph, but stillness that no longer needs defense.